All right, I think that chime means that we're live for this webinar. So let's get this started. First, I want to say welcome and thanks for joining the conversation today as we explore the state of the market. ANZ talent acquisition trends for 2026. My name is Martin Herbst. Do we have the slides up? Can we get the slides up? As we wait for the slides, I'll just go, we've got some amazing panelists today. Before I introduce the panelists, I'll be running through the numbers from our brand new unreleased report, which you'll all receive a copy of afterwards. And our speakers will bring the color with expert commentary. Because basically how we do this is we've got a bunch of amazing numbers from our own internal database across all the different companies that use JobAdder. I provide a lot of data, the trends, and then we've got some amazing commentary and color from our panelists. So I want to see if I can just bring up the slides myself. Do it this way. Okay, can you guys see this? That's not what I want to do. I'm going to share it. I'm going to show it. Okay, so welcome again. So as we get this started, so I'm going to actually introduce our stellar lineup for today. I'm delighted to be joined by Matt Woodard. He's a talent leader and trusted industry advisor with 20 years of experience. Matt is most well known as one of the founders of Melbourne's Talent Meetup, as well as his latest venture, Scalar. Welcome, Matt, again.
Thank you. Good to be back.
And we also have another returning panelist, Hannah Mundell, a seasoned recruitment leader with over 14 years of experience spanning New Zealand and the US. Hannah brings a deep understanding of talent acquisition, governance, and HR strategy to today's conversation. Welcome again, Hannah.
Thank you for having me.
So together, with you guys, our speakers will be unpacking the key findings from our 2026 State of Talent Acquisition Report. And we're exploring what we do here is really look through the key shifts in the market, particularly over the last 12 months, but in some cases we look over the last 2 years or so, and we have a good sense of what there could be in the weeks ahead or the months ahead. Before we get started, I just want to touch on some housekeeping. The questions tab is in the corner of your screen, so you can submit questions throughout the session, and we will have a Q&A session at the end for about 10 minutes or so. This session will be recorded, and the copy of the report will be shared afterwards. Also, a quick survey will pop up at the end, so we'd love to hear your thoughts if you want to add them. We always love the feedback. So we have lots of ground to cover, so we're going to jump right in. And we jump in, the usual place that we normally start these is we look at overall job demand, and we look at that particularly by new roles open per organization, more specifically the average number of jobs per company account on JobAdder. It's a really good barometer of market activity and hiring demand. And so we break this down on an average on a quarterly basis. And you can see here, we're going back all the way to the beginning of 2023. We're still sort of coming off of a bit of a peak there with a hiring demand through the COVID cycle. And then you see in the blue line is Australia and the green line is New Zealand. And if we look at actually the trends, we see that job creation has continued down over the last few years in Australia with a year-over-year dip of 10% overall, and which is actually higher than the year prior. Demand was highest in Q1 and then Q3 with an average of 32 and about 37 jobs created respectively. And then Q4 of 2025, we saw a seasonal dip to about 30 or 14% down year over year. Now, the story for New Zealand is more pleasantly the opposite. So it's kind of the other way around. We saw an overall increase year over year of 8.5%. So it's a nice trending up. And like Australia, demand was highest in Q1 and Q3. So then when it comes to we look at overall roles per organization, but then we look on an individual basis. What about the overall workload that we have in terms of job demand per TA, TA specialist again? And so this is measured by number of roles opened per user on the job adder platform. So as you can see, the results kind of mirror what we're seeing at an account level for each region, but although not as dramatically. In Australia, we can see that TAs were opening an average of just about 13 new roles in Q1. And that was staying stable at 13, jumped up to about 13.6, and then down a bit in Q4. Now, when you're comparing these trends year over year, it was fairly stable. It was about just 1% versus last year. And then New Zealand, it's a little bit of a different trend. I mean, it kind of mirrors what's happening with the overall number of roles per account. So you have an average of 11.7 to start the year, dropping down to 10.7, and then increasing quite a bit to match the same levels in Australia. Overall, year over year, the job creation per user was up slightly by about 3.5%. So, all right. So now over to our color panelists. I'm going to start with Matt. What's been the biggest shift you've seen in job demand this year, and how are strong teams handling these challenges versus those who aren't?
Yeah, that's a good question to start with, and thank you for having me back. So I think there's a few things that I sort of pulled out from this. Is that hiring over the last sort of 12 months felt fairly stable, but it also felt a bit more disciplined. There were fewer sort of speculative or expansion roles, and organizations who, when they were hiring, it was more sort of critical or revenue linked roles that could really help drive the organizations forward. I guess aligned to that is that the bar for hiring, certainly those mid to senior roles, is a lot higher. I think they're organizations are prioritizing candidates who can make sort of immediate business impact. And I think to add on to that, I think what we're also seeing is that there's less appetite for more junior capacity as a result of that. Now, the final thing on that is that I guess increased demand for AI fluent capability has started to come in as well. Organizations really seeking, certainly in engineering spaces, I've done a lot of work in really seeking to have people with either fledgling experience or a little bit of background in AI already, and I think that's set to continue. In terms of how strong teams are handling it versus those who don't, I think the strongest teams really sort of take a breath before going to market, really making sure they tighten the role scoping before opening the position. Really making sure they have sort of 3 to 5 clear sort of success signals up front. And I think ultimately that allows them to move through the process quickly, assess all the applications much more quickly and much more cleanly. Really, I think they're treating hiring as an investment decision. Now, on the other side of that, teams who maybe don't have as much capability, opening roles reactively. I think they're getting lost in the application volume, which I guess we'll come on to afterwards. But I think they often confuse activity with progress. Being busy doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the right things. So that's kind of what I've been finding. What about you, Hannah?
Yeah, so for New Zealand, I think very similar to Australia in terms of those sentiments. And, we've been hit quite hard here over the last couple of years with the economy and the job market. And we're starting to sort of see and hear some cautious optimism from businesses, but it's still a bit slow. The positive outcome for employers, though, is that it's giving great opportunities to hire really high quality talent that they wouldn't normally see on the market. And so I'm definitely seeing people make the most of them. And I think, things are stabilizing a little bit now. A lot of the big restructures and layoffs seem to have stopped. And so there isn't the same influx of candidates entering the market all at the same time. I was really surprised by that stat of 8.5% increase in new job openings. And so I had to go and dig into that a bit more for the market. And that's actually supported by the MBA job ad index, which said there was a 6.4% increase last quarter alone, which is normally the quarter when things quieten down. So yeah, I think there's some really optimistic things happening in the market there.
Yeah, I like to say I love seeing that as well, and you know, it's serendipitous that the color for New Zealand is green. So maybe New Zealand's getting back in the green when it comes to, you know, the where the job demand is happening. And I also want to touch back on what Matt said. I think that's a great way to be able to tee up strong teams versus the weak teams, and that theme of proactive versus reactive, I think, is an important one, and we'll definitely dig into that in the coming minutes, in the coming slides. So this is a great way to start off, because we look at the overall job demand, job flow coming into different organizations and down into the TA level. Now we look at actually one more metric to see what's going on, and that's actually, well, there's a difference between, well, hey, what roles you have open versus the actual number of hires that you're making. And the first thing I want to clarify with this, because you may notice a bit of a subtle difference in the numbers, is the actual number of hires per user is greater than the number of roles open, and that's typically because you can have, you know, a few people or a few actual placements per role that's opened. But the numbers are interesting here, and we're going to start with, you know, Australia again. Now, despite, you know, that tough position, Australian TAs, again, if we look at the blue line, are managing to keep their hiring levels extremely stable. They're making an average of just about 21 hires in 2024 per TA, and that stayed relatively the same, you know, in 2025 at you know, just 20.7. You know, the story for New Zealand is a bit, you know, different. You know, it's almost converse of what we saw with the actual roles. It's in some ways a bit hard to explain, where you had a high level of placements or hires per user in 2024, and that's dropped down a bit coming into 2025. And there might be some theories that will, you know, around what we get to, but either way, I think, you know, how you're actually making the best use of your time for the roles that are that you have open is a really interesting thing to be able to dig into. So again, going to start with Matt for the Australian side. How do you think TAs have been able to maintain their hiring levels despite, you know, maybe that downward shift in job demand?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think without sort of repeating myself from the last question, I think it feels that hiring is more cautious, not frozen. I think while the demand has softened, core roles are, you know, core and critical, business critical roles are continuing to be approved. You know, as I mentioned, businesses are really prioritizing the ones that will help drive revenue or really sort of help take things forward. You know, critical ops roles are being considered as well, but it's much more of those sort of value adding, game changing roles. Again, there's more scrutiny up front. Roles are taking longer to be approved, but we are finding, you know, better discipline, process discipline. As I mentioned, you know, having real clarity ahead of going to market, with the understanding that there is a huge number of you know, talented people and the volumes are getting higher. Being crystal clear about exactly what you're looking for, so that you can be really targeted when you do go to find the right people. And I think the other thing as well is that we are, you know, TA teams are generally a bit leaner than they were 4 to 5 years ago. So they have to be more laser focused. They have to have a clearer focus around where they prioritize their work as well. So I think there's a few things in that.
Yeah, and similar comments, you know, as before, that discipline becomes really important, and it can be, when you're pressured and if you're leaner, you can be kind of pushed into a corner and be more reactive and, you know, almost firefighting, versus what you said before about taking that a longer breath before you get started, which can probably save you a bunch of breaths later on. And then Hannah, what's your take on some of the stats here? Maybe some other advice for TAs, managing the job load.
Yeah, I think in terms of the data for New Zealand, it's quite up and down and patchy, which is really reflective of what's been happening in the economy. Like, last year there was so much uncertainty and lack of business confidence in terms of making the decisions to, they haven't wanted to grow because they had been focusing on downsizing. And I think we're sort of seeing a little bit of that in the data from last year, really reaffirming what was actually happening in the market. And the trend now is more towards businesses are trying to move forward. They're identifying need, but then they're still putting pause. And so where we're seeing an increase in like job openings, but then them not being fulfilled. And so I think probably like what strategic talent acquisition teams need to be doing is staying really close to the business, to their hiring managers, to see if they can help reduce that start-stop nature of recruitment. Obviously, it affects their workload, but really the candidate's experience and the impact on your company brand. So being able to stay closer to work on your workforce planning will hopefully help just to smooth that out a little bit.
I'll just jump in there. It was a really interesting point you raised there, but I still think that's continuing a little bit to a degree this year as well. There does feel to be a bit of a start-stop nature around that. So maybe there's opportunities for organisations to have clearer focus around better workforce planning, or just that clarity around what those key strategic roles are going to be for the year. So interesting that that's kind of continuing.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Anna.
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, we're in March now, and we're already sort of seeing and hearing happening sort of at the moment. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that this year, and this is where like the green shoots are coming through, right? We're hopeful, the businesses are trying, and then it's like, oh, something else has happened, and that's where they're staying really close to it. It's just going to be so important.
Yeah, control your controllables, because it's a start-stop nature. I think is almost we've seen the last 2 or 3 years is almost a new normal. We have all these potential anticipation of the market getting better and the rates going down, and then things happen geopolitically. Seems to happen every few months now, if not sooner. That there's like, oh, wait a second, what does this mean? I know there's election coming up in New Zealand too, so it's creating a bit of that ambiguity and that hesitation as well. So yes, controlling what you can in your own sphere, in that TA position, and staying close to the business, so you can be ready to be able to deal with that ambiguity and that stop-start nature is huge. So we're going to keep moving, and then we've now looked at job demand and now actual productivity in terms of those hires. Now we look at actually the nature of the roles themselves. So what we've done is looked at the composition of those roles, and it's split between temp. This could be true temp roles, contract roles, or permanent hires. This goes back 2 years. So we start at 2023 in Q1. The dark blue is your permanent placements. The lighter blue is your contract or your temp placements. There's a lot of different data points here. So, and when you've got so many, sometimes it's hard to discern a trend. But I think what you can see is that, one is, I think it's always surprising to see there's a lot, probably more temp and contract roles in terms of the actual percentage of hires than people maybe realize. But also there's a slight trend more toward temp and contract. And if you look at all of 2024, on the permanent side, it was about 56.4%, and that's actually gone down to 55%. Conversely, across Australia, New Zealand, temp roles accounted for 44.1% of all hires in Q1 this year, and it's actually grown to 46.6% by Q4. So, Hannah, we're going to start with you. What do you think could be influencing this sort of growing reliance on temp roles? Does it represent a new norm for how workforces are operating?
Yeah, I think this goes back to the uncertainty we're experiencing with the economy and business confidence. There's still a need for people to be performing tasks, performing these jobs, but having gone through, some people have gone through big restructures and big redundancies, and they don't want to do that again. And so it gives them opportunity to flex their company size and requirements as needed by having temp. And when I say temp, I mean, I'm talking about like, fixed term contract and temporary nature. So I think it's quite a broad covering that I think about when I think about temp. And I think there's going to be an outcome from this as we start to see the economy recover and the job market recover. Like, we're hoping to start seeing an upwards trend, is that businesses that are relying quite heavily on that temp or fixed term labour market will start to see them exit that market and perhaps not stick around because they'll be looking for job security. There's a lot of people that are in that temporary employment that actually their preference is for permanent work and job security. And as soon as that comes back, they'll start kind of leaving the that resource pool of temporary employees, but also not just temporary, but part-time as well. Some of these stats just got me a bit curious, and so I did go and have a look. And there's been a 55% increase in part-time job ads in New Zealand, which I think is contributing to like a lot of this data. And so what that means is that there's like an underutilization of people that aren't in permanent full-time employment that want to be. And I think it's something that businesses are going to have to really be aware of as they try and regrow again.
Yeah, that's huge, 55% increase, if I heard that right. I mean, that's amazing. So, and that brings us to my next question for Matt. Like, what's the risk of companies, over relying on temp and contract roles?
Yeah, I completely agree with Hannah there. It does feel like it is in some sectors becoming almost a semi-permanent sort of model, where contractors are being used as longer term cover for permanent capability, because organisations don't feel that they have the confidence to hire those people directly. I think the key risks really are that you have IP walking out the door every time a contractor leaves. I think that can often a high number of contractors can often create more of a transient culture in the business, which is obviously difficult to when you're trying to build company culture, especially in the sort of the digital world and the ways of working that we have these days. It's even harder to build that team culture. I think the cost of there's a false economy around having contractors. Often they're more expensive than a permanent staff member might actually end up costing. I think somebody made a really good comment the other day that actually having an ongoing pool of contractors actually means that you don't have sort of leadership potential in your business. You're not growing your next leaders in the business, which you're just plugging people in to fill gaps, which is obviously detrimental to a business's long-term growth. And I think the other key thing is that it's a strain on leadership as well. If you're constantly onboarding new people and constantly getting people up to speed, there's a big drain on that level of capability as well. So there's a few key things, but yeah, I see with the way things are in the market at the moment, you can sort of understand why organisations are being a little bit more cautious.
Yeah, some real hidden costs there that really, I think, are hard to measure, but definitely compound over time. So we're going to keep moving and look actually the other side of the equation on the applicant side. And if we've seen relatively stable numbers and trends here, we're going to see something different in a second. So what we look at is candidate supply. So candidate supply is really measured by the average number of applications per job. And again, we're going back to the beginning of 2023. Same colors for Australia, New Zealand. And it's just a massive jump over the last couple of years. Slightly different by market. If we start with Australia, we see that applications have surged. In Australia, it's up 17% year over year. Things were, although up quite a bit from 2023, they're a little bit milder in 2025 versus last year, with just a 0.7% increase. So that may suggest that we're reaching a bit of a saturation a point where it's hard for the market to go higher than that in terms of applications. It does mark the highest volume of applications ever recorded in Australia, surpassing pre-pandemic levels in 2019. But as with any aggregated data, the story is nuanced across different industries. Not all industries are still experiencing the same flood. Some sectors are actually struggling to get the right candidates. So this continued upward trend of candidate numbers is in line with unemployment trends too. It's actually kind of understandable if you understand the large unemployment rates. In Australia, unemployment rates lingered around the 4 to 4.5% mark throughout 2025, and they stabilized a bit. In New Zealand, they faced their highest unemployment rate in a decade at 5.4%, but that's also seems to be a bit more stable. So with this information, again, we'll start with Matt. What's your advice for Australian TAs who are still seeing high volume application numbers? How can we effectively handle those rising numbers without compromising on really a quality candidate experience?
I was smiling there because we've had the same conversation, Mark, for the last 3 years. Every year it's like, this is the highest it's been for 5 years, and it just seems to be going up. Maybe we have reached sort of saturation point, but you do feel for TA teams who are getting, and that's another effectively 20% more applications on what was already, significant numbers. So, it's understandable that teams might feel like they're drowning. So I think to sort of reiterate some of my earlier points, I think the first key thing is really to fix the front door. So a lot of problems really start with vague job briefs. So tighten the job ads. Make sure there's very clear essential skills, nice to haves, and make sure you're using the knockout questions. Make sure you're giving people the opportunity to self-select out of the process, and because you're explicit about exactly what you're looking for. I think that will help. That helps increase clarity and reduce noise, and hopefully that means that you're in a positive way. You're getting less applications, but more of the right applications. I think, as I sort of mentioned, define those sort of success signals early, so that when you are screening through candidates, you can do it very quickly and very confidently, knowing that you have a few key things that you're looking for, and then when that person doesn't have it, then you can move on quickly. So that helps you. That just helps move through the process quickly, rather than sort of having you second guessing yourself through the process. Screen structurally, not maybe emotionally. Use scorecards and consistent criteria to make sure that everybody's assessed quickly and equitably, and just move. Just treat. You don't need to deeply analyze all hundreds of applications to be thorough. The key is to maybe to triage, go through, say, 50 at a time, or make sure that you sort of you can move as quickly as you can, rather than sort of keeping an ad open for, say, 30 days. If you've got 100 applications in a week, take the ad down, go through that process, make sure that if you've got the right level of quality through that process, great, then you've done your bit. You don't need to sort of keep it open for extra time. Just be really smart about how you go, how you sort of present and go to market. I think just to finish on that, I'll pass to Hannah. I guess it's from my mind, isn't the number of applications. The level of applications isn't really the issue. I think it's just the lack of clarity from a business perspective at the beginning, which probably is.
Yeah. And I've got one additional thought. I want to go to Hannah. Maybe we can both come back on this, and that's sort of the quality versus quantity type of dimension. But let me come back to that in a second. So, Hannah, when you look at New Zealand, we are seeing a bit of a stabilization in that supply number after years of intensely higher application numbers. Why do you think this may be the case, and what are the implications of that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a saturation point there. There's only so many jobs and so many people in New Zealand is one part of it, and the other is, I think, stabilization of the unemployment numbers. Although they remain stubbornly high, there's not a lot of it's not continuing to increase. And what we saw over a period of certainly 12 months was a lot of restructures and a lot of redundancies all at once. And so you had mass amounts of people hitting the market. And so I think that was increasing the amount of applications that we're seeing and getting. There are more people getting into jobs, but also I think there is a big impact for New Zealand, and we're going to see fallout from this, which is how many have left. We've had a really big exodus of people to around the world, but lots of them have gone to Aussie. And so I think that that's given us a bit of a balancing with those application numbers as well. I mean, they're not really dropping, they're just stabilizing. And Matt, you did say this, and I did just want to mention this as well for your part with around these large volumes. And this is a little bit of a bugbear of mine, which is that, if we're being thoughtful about this, if we're not using database to search and we're going to post an ad and we're being thoughtful about it, is that we close the ads down because obviously it manages the volumes for us, but it also manages our brand and the candidate experience and all of that stuff that we talk about. It's not necessary to leave a job open for that long where you've got like thousands of applications in there. It feels very excessive, and it doesn't feel like we're being very responsible with what we're doing when that happens. And I do see interviews and comments from employers where they talk about this and getting thousands of applications, and I just sit there going, why?
Yeah, and that's an interesting point too about the migration. So I think what Hannah, you're saying is that this increase in number here is coming from New Zealand. So it stayed flat in New Zealand, but that increase is actually because of Kiwis coming up to Australia. So one additional thing I want to throw in here is that what are you guys seeing in terms of quality of applications? Because it's one thing if the quantity is going up and how to effectively manage that. What's happening with quality? And I can see both sides of this. It could be actually because of AI and the ability to apply so much more easily, the superficial quality could be going up, but the actual quality could be going down.
I think as a general comment, I think just because you've got more applications, it doesn't mean the quality's higher. In fact, it's harder for TA teams to actually separate the unsuitable applicants from the good candidates. Especially if the best candidate has applied 2 weeks into the process and there's 150 applications already. You just kind of get lost in the noise. A really good friend of mine is applying for jobs at the moment, and he said, I don't want to apply for a job too early. I don't want to seem too eager. And I said, well, actually, that's the opposite of what you should do, because get in early, get your before you're one of 150, you're one of 110, you have a much better chance of getting visibility. So yeah, to answer your question, Martin, a bit of a tangent, but the quality isn't higher because there's more applications. In fact, it just makes TA's life harder to find the good quality amongst the not so right people. So I agree with that to an extent. I think when you've got an excessive number of applicants, you're getting that because everybody under the sun is applying. But from my experience in this market, what we're seeing is a higher quality of candidate that are available. We've been able to employ people who previously wouldn't have been on the market or been available to us because, we've been in a talent short market. So it's been so competitive and so much harder. So I think there's pros and cons with sort of what's happening with that. And you're still getting good people. There are still good quality coming through, but TAs just have to work that much harder to find them, right? You do.
But I also think the last year, what's been happening is we've ended up in positions where we've had multiple people that we could have offered a role to, which is a great outcome for us as employers and businesses in terms of bringing that quality in. But it's really important then to kind of maintain those relationships with the people who you might not have offered it to, because actually they should be forming part of your talent strategy for the future, in terms of how you're keeping in touch with your talent pipeline and great people, because when it all turns around again and you need them, you want them to have had a good experience and remember you and want to come and still be considered.
Yeah, very good points. And we're going to keep going because we talked about all these applicants coming through, and now we're going to look at, well, where are they coming from? And we talked about ads and taking ads down. Well, here, this is really some of the data right here, because what we have basically proactive sourcing versus job posting, where we're going back to 2023 again. The dark blue is when you actually are hiring somebody through ad channel, the candidates come through the ad channels, versus proactively sourcing from your own network, from your own database. Now, the numbers don't look that remarkable in terms of the trend, but if you actually boil it down, so first off, like, clearly, the vast majority is through ad channels, but also where the trend is going, because you had back in 2023, 1 out of 10 were from your own database, from your own network, but that's gone down to about 1 out of 20, which can make a massive difference. And that difference, one of the differences, of course, is what are you trying to solve for? Ideally, it's time to hire, it's quality of hire, it could be cost of hire. But we can measure the time to hire. And so here in Australia, we see the actual number of days it requires to hire for a role, if it's through an ad channel versus a proactive sourcing. In Australia, so TAs place roles on average almost 2 weeks, 12.8 days faster using a job out of database compared to relying on job boards. In New Zealand, that difference was even more stark, with roles being filled almost 3 weeks, 20.7, literally 3 weeks, 20.7 days faster using the database. So I know you guys are sort of licking your lips when you think about this opportunity. So again, Matt, we'll start with you. Like, what do you think about this, and how do we actually TAs can use their database more to take advantage of this?
Do you know, at this point, this day just feels like rage bait to me, Martin. I feel like an old man shouting into a cloud. There's a lot of reasons for it. It's disappointing to see this. There's a lot of reasons for it. It's habit. People are creatures of habit, so it's just, this is what I always do. Job boards are just a default reflex. It feels productive when you've got a new job and you post the ad. It looks like you're doing something. We are at the point where a lot of non-TAs are owning the process. People have been made redundant, so hiring managers or non-experienced people are just that understand that's what they need to do. Just post an ad and hope for the best. Database neglect, I think that's a key thing that a lot of organizations have people moving through the business and somebody owns the processes and leave, and no one is there to pick it up. So it feels like the data is unreliable after a point. Either, I guess another key thing is that a lot of TA don't have the capability to source or to understand how to source within their own ATSs. That's another key thing. So if it's in the too hard basket, then they'll just default to what they know they can do. Time could be another thing, and I guess short-term thinking as well. Not thinking about like a long-term strategy around how we can actually utilize our silver medalists and people we've had in the process in the past. There's a huge, as we discussed, there's huge volumes of applications coming through. So let's just put an ad up and we'll find someone that way. That's just the quickest and easiest. I think how TAs can pivot towards using their databases more. I think make sure you implement and you stick to a tagging system that you can identify your silver medalists or your potentially future hires much more easily. Clean up your database quarterly. Make it as part of your process to go in and remove any candidates. I think the new GDPR regulations and things, you have to go and do that anyway. But just make it sort of habit forming part of your role to just go through and make sure that anybody who isn't suitable doesn't remain in there. Create more talent pools. And this is another really good one actually. Set like a source KPI. As an organisation, if you're not hiring huge numbers this year and you're being very strategic about who you are hiring, set a KPI. Say 30% of all of our hires needs to come via database source candidates. Like, have that as part of your overall TA talent strategy, to say we will will do this as part of our plan. You know, there are a lot of good people that we could otherwise, that we have engaged in the past, that are worth re-engaging. And think of the cost and time. You know, 2 weeks per hire, you're saying, you know, 10 candidates, that saved you so much time and effort that could be put into more productive areas, and get more training. I think that's the other thing as well. You know, there's one of the things that I've been pushing for is the ATS providers to do more in terms of supporting and providing advice around how they go about supporting their customers, because obviously there seems to be a real lack, based on the stats, a real lack of awareness around how to actually go about doing it. I was going to come back to you, Martin, and put you on the spot here, but what a job added doing much in that space?
We're doing quite a bit, actually. Now, stay tuned on that, Matt. I'll actually speak to some of that we've done on the product side. But if you are a customer in Job Adder, we do have weekly webinars to get as much out of Job Adder as you possibly can. A lot of it is really how to more effectively mine your database with some of the things, especially we've done with the Adder Intelligence launch. But stay tuned on that. So, Hannah, beyond faster placements, so how can TAs better leverage their database for long-term talent strategy and employer branding?
Well, I love my Job Adder talent pool folders that I have set up. Just a little plug for Job Adder there for you, Martin. Look, I think having your database set up really well and having those talent pools set up really well it's just critical for the teams to be able to respond quickly. I think one of the reasons that we default to putting up a job ad is because there's something it's tangible, right? It's like Pokemon, got to catch them all. Like your job ad's up, applications are coming in. It looks like we're doing something really quickly. But if we have got warm candidates that we've already been engaging with, then it can actually help us hire faster. And the stats that you showed us before showed that there. The delays around the time to hire is because people put a job ad up and they wait 2 or 3 weeks for it to close, and then they go and have a look, and then they do the interviews, and it just drags out the process for everybody. So, if you can really, especially our databases are chocker full at the moment, all these candidates, all these applicants. So putting some time and effort into that up front will help at the end. And then I think, in terms of employer branding, if you've got an EVP plan in place, you're able to use that database as a mailing list in some way to keep in touch with them. Hey, we've got these jobs. Do you know about this? What do you want to hear from us? And so engaging with them from a employer brand perspective is something that you can do as well. But I did want to just thank Matt for mentioning the cleaning up your database, because I think it's something that doesn't really get talked about, and it will help you with your talent pipelining. But I think that there's there's considerations in both our countries, both our regions, around the Privacy Act and keeping data for its intended purposes, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I just picked that up because of what you said, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was a really good way to round off the actual stats and covering those. So what we're going to do is, before we go to Q&A, think of we've looked back over the last couple of years. Now let's have a couple of thoughts moving forward. So I'd love to ask both of you, what's one major trend you see shaping talent acquisition 2026, and how can TA leaders prepare for that? I'm going to switch the order this time. Actually, let's start with Hannah. You go first.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of trends of what we're going to see, firstly, I think it's going to be market recovery. And so how are we supporting the businesses and ourselves in terms of that recovery? I think that a lot of talent acquisition teams have really shrunk in size, and so they're going to grow as the businesses start to grow again as well, and there'll be time and pressure on them for that before the hiring starts, because businesses don't tend to grow their teams until they're really squished. So setting yourselves up for that, for success, is something that you're going to need to really just think about how you do that. But I'm going to mention AI. It's really topical, and I think that we need to be very transparent in our processes and our use of technology and how we're using AI for recruitment. There's a real mistrust from people in the market about AI and how it's being used. If you look online, on social media, on LinkedIn, Reddit, anywhere you are, it's being talked about quite a lot. And it's quite a resentful sentiment from candidates that humans aren't looking at their applications, or they're not being engaged with at a human level. And so just don't sleep on the candidate experience or the communication or the transparency around it, because that will, again, affect your brand and reputation and ability to access candidates. I've seen some pretty bold statements from people that have said, if this is AI, then I'm not going to apply, because I want to deal with a human being. But I think that we need to accept that, AI is being used. I don't think it's as broadly being used as what candidates think it is, but it's obviously there and something that's really weighing on them. I would say that that's something we need to just really think about, how we use it, how we communicate it.
Thanks, Hannah. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Well, I wish I'd gone first, because that's kind of where I was going with that. I think yes, no, absolutely. No, I think AI absolutely is going to be at some point is going to be a baseline for most organisations, not a differentiator. I think that'll be probably one of the biggest shifts as we all become more accustomed and more comfortable and more, I guess, across exactly what that looks like for our individual organisations. I think where organisations can really get ahead is by really sort of investing in not just the tools but the capabilities for the people using it. So one organisation I've heard of recently does mandated quarterly AI training for all of their staff, regardless of their roles, so that everybody, they want as a business to be more AI literate. So having all of their people be coming on that journey as they go is really, really important to them. I think that's something that organisations should consider to whatever degree they can do it. I think redesigning process around speed and a signal is really important. Yeah, understanding where AI can help with admin, so that can then redeploy the human into more of those value-adding pieces, the relationship building, the candidate experience, recruitment, marketing, the sourcing kind of elements that seem to get lost when people get busy. That's going to be really important. Candidate experience, as I said, I think we're at a point where applications are as high as they've probably ever been. So the candidate experience, the ability to respond and acknowledge every single application is what is going to make the difference to candidate experience, but also to organisational brands going forward as well. I think to echo your point there, Hannah, I think trust with using AI is really critical. So organisations who can be explicit about how they use it and why they're using it and where, that will build trust with candidates for sure.
Yeah, excellent. Some great thoughts going into 2026. Before we move on, we're running a little bit late in time, but we still probably have maybe some time for a question or two if they come through. As we wait to get those, I'm just going to answer a question, Matt. You asked me before what some of the things that JobAdder's doing. So back in November, we launched Adder Intelligence. So that's our suite of AI tools designed to deliver results on day one. I mean, we all know that recruitment's moving faster than ever. AI is everywhere, but for many recruiters, it's still a bit intimidating and hard to trust. That's where the training, I think, comes in too. TAs probably spend at least 60% of their time on admin. Candidates expect speed and they expect personalization. And companies really demand efficiency and lower costs. So what we wanted to do is to design something that solves those problems without adding complexity to your existing operations. And so Adder Intelligence starts with your actual workflow. It adds AI where you need most of the help. It keeps you in control. A couple of the things that we've launched, if you haven't used them already, I highly recommend. Some of the things that we've spoken to even today, smart summary, so you can really get all the information about a candidate that's in your database, and to make those more insightful, quicker decisions. And then also to keep that database fresh is Smart Sync, which again helps sync up all the data that you may have about candidates. And so you're getting the most out of your database. We had 3 simple pillars. Keep it simple, 0 friction. It should be very intuitive. You shouldn't have training. It should just come, be in your workflow. It should be empowering, right? It's ultimately, at the end of the day, it's something that you can trust and put recruiters firmly in control. And then purposeful, because ultimately it should only work to help you get better business results and better hiring results. So we've got something coming out just next week, another release. Look out for this again. The whole theme about getting more out of your network, out of your database. We have something that's called, a bit of spoiler alert, Smart Match, Smart Search and Match. And so what that does, it skips manual searches and tricky Boolean strings, so you can instantly see a ranked shortlist of the best fit candidates in your database. So we've got one question. I think we have time for one question at least. So the question is, based on everything that has been discussed today, what's the one thing you think TA teams should invest or prioritize immediately to improve hiring outcomes? You guys can only choose one thing. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first if you like. So really, again, just echoing an earlier comment, I think role clarity before market engagement is probably the thing that I would stress and suggest that organizations really double down on. With the sort of focus around hiring and being really cautious about going to market, making sure that you really have deep clarity around exactly what it is you're seeking before you go to market. And I think that will just help organizations hire quicker, but just and attract the right sort of candidates in the first place.
That's good. Hannah, what do you think?
I think mine is training for your TA teams, and specifically focusing around building talent pipelines, using the database, focusing on sourcing. I think that sourcing training, because even being able to do that using your own ATS is a skill, and isn't something that I don't think a lot of TA teams spend a lot of time on.
Yeah, I think that makes
and
a lot
that
of
will
sense.
mean you'll post less job ads because you'll be more comfortable and confident doing that.
100%. 100%.
Save some money.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing. Hey, listen, the last question was actually a question from one of the attendees about Smart Summary, which I just mentioned. And if it's possible to send that through, again, if you haven't used it, check it out. If you can send that through to the hiring manager portal. If not, is this in the plan of the future? There are ways to be able to grab that Smart Summary and to be able to send it across, but not to seamlessly put it into the hiring manager portal. But there are some plans around that. And what we can do is follow up with that attendee to get more information. And I think on that note, since we were only planning to go 45 minutes, we've gone a little bit extra. I do want to thank everyone here for attending. And in particular, I want to thank my amazing panelists, Matt and Hannah, for providing so many good insights. And thanks to everyone, and hopefully see you sooner than the next time.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, don't forget, you're going to get the report. And if you can, stick around and provide a bit of feedback. Thanks again. See you guys.